Well, hello everyone. My name is Bruce Jans in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Central Florida, and I'm also the co-director of the Center for Humanities and Digital Research, and also part of the core faculty of the Text and Technology PhD program. So I today would like to talk through the syllabus for our course. That's Philosophy 5665, Knowledge, Responsibility, and Society. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of what I plan on doing in this course, and what I'm looking for from you, and what we'll be reading, and all the rest of that sort of thing. So I think the place to start is just with the syllabus. So let me kick you over there. Here we go. And so it's a normal web course. This was never initially planned to be a face-to-face course, so the structure is the same as it always has been. We never needed to make a switch because of pandemic or anything like that. The first thing you need to know about this course is, I guess, how important the title is to what we're actually going to be doing. This is a course that is a core course in the Graduate Ethics Certificate. Some of you may have already taken the first course in that, the other core course, which is a theoretical ethics course. So this course is called Knowledge, Responsibility, and Society, and I take those three words very seriously. What it means to me, how I understand those words, is first, the word knowledge is really gesturing towards epistemology in philosophy. That is, the theories of knowledge, the questions around the demarcations of knowledge. In other words, what we call knowledge, where that starts and stops, and what's beyond it. Is it opinion, belief, conjecture? What exactly is it? It has to do with our methods for producing knowledge, so everything from the scientific method to how we trust testimony from people, what gets counted as truth, what doesn't get counted as truth, how narrative works into this, all sorts of things of that nature. So that's the first word. The second word is responsibility, and the plan there, or the idea there, is that that's the word that's looking towards ethics for me. When we often think of responsibility, we often think of personal responsibility. In other words, individuals' responsibility for things, and we often have a kind of I don't know if accusatory is the right word, but we often imply blame. So if somebody's responsible for something, we might think, well, they're to blame for it. Sometimes, of course, we don't. Sometimes responsibility has to do with something good that's happened. But in any case, the assumption is that it is a close connection between individuals' intentions and actions and outcomes. Okay. So what I want to do here is broaden the notion of responsibility. It's not only going to be about individuals being responsible for specific kinds of outcomes. We're also going to be thinking about our responsibilities towards each other. We're going to be thinking about our responsibilities in a complex society, our responsibilities towards our knowledge or our lack of knowledge. We're going to be thinking about that broader notion of ethics that's kind of embedded in the notion of ethos. Okay, so ethos is this idea that we exist in a community that has a set of practices and ways of doing things and understanding, and some of those are expressed as ethical principles, ethical standards, values, things of that nature, but some of them are just expressed as, this is how things are done around here. Okay. And so I'm interested in all of those sorts of things. So really, I guess a broader notion of ethics that's going to take in human behavior at a broader in a broader way. The third term, society. The way I understand that term is as looking towards our social institutions, our social organization. In other words, not just society in a kind of vague sense, but society is very much focused on the ways that we have of structuring our relationships, the ways that we have of regularizing those relationships, the ways that we have of doing things like managing risk, all the things that institutions are supposed to do for us, the ways that we have of justifying our political structures and systems, our economic structures and systems, all of those sorts of things. When I think of society in these terms, I think of the medical system, I think of the educational system, I think of the financial system, the legal system, and many other kinds of things as well. And so, when we're thinking about knowledge, responsibility, and society, we're thinking about what happens at the nexus of those three concepts. Okay, so not just how we know things, not just what are the ethical standards that we have, and how do we live up to them, and how don't we? Not just an analysis of social order, right? All of those things together. And so this is not a course in, some ethics courses will look at the trolley problem, they'll talk about baby Hitler, or what if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you do it? Those kinds of questions are not really going to be the sorts of things we look at in this course. If you want to look at the kinds of questions we are interested in, I've got some at the beginning of the syllabus here. Is there a link between self-knowledge and virtue? Does knowing yourself lead to acting better or engaging the world in a more responsible manner? What does responsibility look like in a digital world? That's an interesting one, especially given the proliferation of social media accounts and the kinds of things that bounce around that world. How do advances in medical and environmental knowledge relate to the state of our social policy and ethical intuitions? Do corporations have ethical responsibility? What are our obligations to the environment? Do we have responsibility to other nations? Do we have responsibility for past injustices? So all of these things take up all of those kinds of concepts together, okay? So I think this is, in some ways, a more grounded discussion of ethics. I hope that those of you who do not have a philosophy background, and usually in this course, that's most, if not almost everyone in the course, I hope that you can see more of the connections between ethics and whatever else you are coming from or are interested in. This is, I hope, a practical notion of ethics. Now, some philosophers might say, well, this isn't really philosophy at this point, is it? And I guess I push back against that. I think it actually is philosophy. Philosophy isn't just about abstractions. It's not just about figuring out a universal in an abstract sense. Yes, we care about universals. Yes, we care about argumentation and principle and all of those sorts of things. And we're going to be doing that here too. But I think, and this actually suffuses my own scholarly work, I think that philosophy is grounded in its places. It's grounded in its people. And those things really do matter. And I think there are ways of credibly doing philosophy while taking those things seriously. And so that's what we're going to be trying to do here. Now, how are we doing this? Well, one way we're doing this is through the texts in the course. If you look at the schedule for the course, let's just go down to that here. Wait, I think I have to go to a different screen. Here we go. Going down to the schedule here. There we go. And I'm just going to put this on full screen here. All right. So you can see in the course that we're currently in what I call Module 0. Module 0 is simply the introductory module. It only goes for a couple of days. And then the modules generally open up on Wednesday mornings. And they're a week long, and they go from Wednesday mornings till Tuesday evenings. And so you can expect the first module to start in a couple of days. What you'll see in the readings is that the first 4 weeks are mostly a kind of trip through the history of Western philosophy. But we've always in this course talked about how that is made more complicated and more conflicted when we start taking into account non-Western ideas. This time in this course, I'm adding something in each week that's not part of the historical story, but is part of the, if you wish, the kind of conceptual story that we're trying to engage in that week. And so in the first week, we've got readings from Plato, Aristotle, and Augustine, in which they're going to talk about, what responsible knowledge looks like. And then we've got something from David Welchman Gigio and Karen Ann Watson Gigio, in which they're looking at indigenous knowledge and how we would think about indigenous knowledge in the context of the readings that we've just done. In the second week, we've got Hobbes, Mill, and Marx, again, three very important figures in the history of the West. We've also got Magobe Ramosa, who's an African philosopher, and some excerpts from his book, African Philosophy Through Ubuntu. And so we're going to look at the notion of Ubuntu as kind of in some way speaking back or speaking along with some of those concepts that we see in these other figures. Third week, Weber, Nietzsche, and Heidegger, and then Senghor, well known as one of the key figures in the Negritude movement and also the former president of Senegal. And so we're going to look at Negritude and African socialism and think about, as it says there, the topic for the week is objectivity versus engagement. And so we're going to think about what it means in an African sense to be engaged in one's world and, how that relates to the figures we've just seen. And then in the next week, we've got Gadamer, David Harvey, and Michel Foucault. We're thinking about knowledge of the self, and alongside that I want to have you read an interview that David Scott does with Sylvia Wynter, who's a very important Caribbean philosopher who worked in the US for a long time. And so she is trying to recover the notion of humanism with a view to those who it left out in the first place. And so with all of these, what I'm hoping here is that you get a kind of good, quick overview of some really important ideas. At the same time, you have all of those ideas made a little bit more complex as we go. I'm not assuming that anyone is coming into this class with a lot of philosophy background, and so I am going to give you some of that background so that we have a kind of common base that we can speak from. Where we go from there next is to Lorraine Code. That's this book right here, Ecological Thinking, The Politics of Epistemic Location. And really, I think of this book as kind of the core of the course, the backbone, if you wish, of the course. What Code does here, she's a Canadian philosopher. She's retired now. I think she's emerita. What she does is really put together feminism, ecological and environmental thinking, and philosophy of science to think about how we rethink epistemology in an ethically credible manner. So that's really kind of right at the core of the kind of stuff I'm interested in this course, and I think she does a great job of kind of getting us to those questions. I will say, with the readings I already talked about, as well as this one, I don't have you do these readings because I think you should entirely agree with anything you read. The point of any readings in a philosophy course is to start the conversation. And so that's what all of these things are doing. I think there's a lot of value in all of these readings, but I also can certainly see ways in which people would take different positions from the writers. Okay, so we've got 3 weeks on Code. Where we go from there is to the a set of cases that are part of These were originally part of a bioethics panel that existed during the Obama years, Obama presidency, and they studied a number of really significant and central issues. We're going to do 3 weeks on those, and there's a connected website for that, so there's nothing for you to buy for those. But the first week is on topics at the intersection of neuroscience, ethics, and society. The second week is ethics in Ebola. This is actually a new one that I've not had before, but given the pandemic, I thought it was appropriate for us to think about epidemiology and things like that. And so they had one on Ebola, which was another epidemic. And then the third one we're looking at is ethically impossible STD research in Guatemala from 1946 to 48. And that's looking at a case which really was the beginning of a lot of IRB studies, in other words, Institutional Review Board studies, which are, if we do any research on human subjects, you have to clear it through an IRB board to make sure that you are engaged ethically with those subjects. And so, that cases like that were really the start or the beginning of why people realized they needed that. So we got 3 weeks on that. The next week is actually a week I really enjoy because one of the textbooks for the course is Choose Your Own Text. I'm well aware that you're coming into this course as people who have backgrounds in all sorts of different areas. When I've taught this course, I've had plenty of people who have legal backgrounds, who have medical backgrounds of all sorts, people who have business backgrounds or finance or economics or something related to that, and just lots of other things. And so what I want to do is to get you to connect the material for the course and the ideas of the course with those kinds of things that you have in your background. And so there will be a week in which we will all be talking about whatever books you have chosen. I'll be asking you to do an assignment on that, and we'll talk about the assignments in a moment. I'll also be asking you to upload a shortened version, or maybe the whole version if you want, to the discussion area so that we can all see what everyone did and so we can all talk about those things. I think there's a great value in all of us exchanging the kind of knowledge and background that we have and investigating further, along the themes of the course. So we're going to be doing that assignment as well. Finally, the final readings that we have are from this book, Post-Truth by Lee McIntyre. We've got 2 weeks on this book, and this is, as the title suggests, really a book about the question of our ethical obligations towards truth. This is especially relevant as we draw to the end of a presidency which has been, to say the least, turbulent, in which discussions about impeachment have come up again. Much of that is driven by, people believing conspiracy theories, people believing things that are demonstrably false, but being absolutely convinced that they are in fact true. And so, I think this course is a great place for us to think about what we might do under those circumstances. What obligations do we have towards the truth? Does simply believing something very, very fervently, is that enough, right? Do we need to take that seriously? Is somebody's sincerity of belief enough that we should be making room for that in a public conversation? So we've got a couple of weeks on Lee McIntyre's book, and then I'm going to talk about what we do in the last week as we talk about the assignments. Okay, so that is the kind of overview of the syllabus. So let me talk a little bit about what the actual work for the course is. And I'm going to flip back to this. Here we go. So in this course, as you see here, the class format is that this is a seminar, and I'm trying to model this as much as possible on a standard graduate seminar. That means that, if you've ever been in a face-to-face graduate course, you know that what generally happens is that you have a group of maybe up to 15 people. You have readings for that week. You're all in a big room together around a big table, and somebody is generally assigned the week's readings to do a presentation on, and they lead the presentation from the beginning, and then there's a discussion on it. In other words, the professor is not there to lecture all the time. The professor is there as part of a conversation with a particular background and expertise, of course, but this is not simply you sitting passively and listening to whatever I have to say and jotting notes down and giving them back to me at the end, okay? That's not what a graduate course is. A graduate course is an actual struggle with ideas, dealing with ideas as much as possible between all of us. Now, that's a hard thing to do in an online course. We have a discussion area, and I will be looking for you to, do some fairly robust discussions on the readings that we have in a given week. You can see that here as the first graded assignment. Each week we'll have a discussion post. I'll be looking for you to both post and respond at least once to somebody else. I'll be looking for a robust post. In other words, not just in response to somebody, not just great job or hey, me too or something like that. I'm looking for something more than that. And so that's part of the deal. As it says in the syllabus here, I'll also have an open thread throughout the term where people can post anything from current events, and I fully expect there to be plenty of current events to post about this term. Last time I taught this course was last spring. Partway through the course, we had the beginnings of the pandemic. and the usual political stuff that goes on in this country, and so there was always plenty to talk about in current affairs. I forgot to mention that there's a mandatory financial aid quiz. You're probably used to this. If you've taken other courses here, every course has to have something in which it demonstrates within the first week that you actually have started the course. So please do that. That's really part of Module 0, if you could do that, please. So we talked about discussions and participation. Seminar presentation. As I said, in a graduate course, typically somebody takes the week's readings and does a presentation on it. You can do that in the form of a PowerPoint. You can do that in the form, a video, I guess, if you want. I've had people do various kinds of things. You can make a web page. You can use a Prezi. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but the point is to both clarify what's going on in the readings and also provide a kind of considered response to what's going on. So you don't just say, here's what this writer is saying. I'm interested in your position on it as well. And I'm interested not in just a kind of a gut response, but in a kind of considered position. In other words, giving reasons for your position on something. It is not the goal for everyone to agree or to be on this, same page on every idea in this course. But it is important that you bring reasoned responses, reasoned ideas to the table, not just, well, I just don't like that because my gut tells me I don't like it. So, there's more in the How to Lead a Seminar document that you'll be able to find. It's in the module, and so you will need to email to me the presentation or the link or something like that before the module opens for a given time. So in other words, before the Wednesday morning, so preferably on the Tuesday, because I need to upload that so that everyone can see it. I generally put those both in the module and also in the discussion area. So please make sure that you get me that if you are scheduled. As well, I will be setting up a schedule for doing modules as quickly as possible. I will be asking you to look at the schedule and give me your top 3 choices for the modules you would like to do, and then I will be constructing a schedule and getting it back out as quickly as possible. The first module opens on Wednesday, and it's fair game. If somebody wanted to do that module, they certainly could. I know that's very quick, and so I'm not necessarily expecting it'll happen, but it certainly is fair game if somebody wants to get it out of the way. So there's a seminar presentation. You can see how much it's worth in the overall course. There is the course Choose Your Own Text exercise, and we've talked about that already a little bit. You'll need to upload your review of your chosen text. I will also want to talk to you about what that text is before you do it, so please, when you get an idea, just bounce it off of me, send me an email, and we can talk about it. And the reason is that I want to make sure that you have something robust enough to actually use, that you can sink your teeth into. I don't want something really superficial. So I tend to not, like people choosing papers unless they're really significant, important, and sometimes fairly lengthy papers. I'm really looking for books on this. I'm also not really looking for intro texts in an area. I'm looking for something where somebody takes a stand on something. All right, so finally, there's a final paper, as one would expect in these things. That final paper, it's broken down into a number of things. The total overall grade is 40% of your final grade, but 5% of that is a prospectus that's due 1 month before the paper deadline, and the paper will be due on the first day of the exam period. So that'll be worth 5%. And the reason for that is that I want to see what you're thinking and give you some feedback on it well in advance of you writing it. You do not have to do exactly what you say in the prospectus. The whole point of a prospectus is to develop ideas. I expect that you will probably change, develop, alter your ideas out of the prospectus after reading comments. So that's fine. There's also going to be in the last week of class, I'm asking you to do a short descriptive post of your paper in the discussion area. That's what we're doing in the last week. And the reason for that is that I want everyone else in the class to be able to chip in on your concept, on your idea. You know, it's very useful if somebody else says, hey, that's an interesting idea. Have you read this? You know, I came across it in my research, and maybe you didn't even know about it. And it's better that you know about that before you have to hand the paper in than after. And so that's why I do that. It's really an attempt to get the best work out of you I possibly can. And that's really my bottom line goal. I really want to see you succeed, and I want to give you every chance to do that at the highest level possible. So that's the work in the course. We've already looked at the schedule, and the only other thing I guess I'll say about it is that if you keep scrolling in the schedule, you'll see what I call the fine but important print, Spring 2021 edition. Every time I teach a course, it seems to be longer. This one is like 10 pages long or something like that at this point. Please read those, because they will answer a lot of questions about what happens in this course. Maybe won't answer everything, but it will answer a fair bit. And so, you know, you will have a much clearer sense of what we're doing. So that's the quick trip through the syllabus. You know, if you have questions, please let me know. There'll be a chance to do that. I think the first, the Module 0 discussion is simply an introduction, so please feel free to introduce yourself there. Tell us a little bit about your background. I love teaching this course. This is just such a fun course because it's so connected to both current affairs and the deep, you know, long history of thought in philosophy and other disciplines. And so it just feels to me like it's just a rich course that we can, you know, do a lot with. And so I'm looking forward to the term, and I'm glad you're in the class. So I will see you soon, and, you know, have fun.